Hey, this is Antonio King, and today we're going to discuss the crucifixion and why there was darkness for 3 hours. Now, this is still part of the crucifixion series, and if you like this type of teaching, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, subscribe to this channel, and also, you can share this. Really, you can. All right, back to our teaching. The Gospels speak of darkness during the crucifixion, when Christ is hanging on the cross, the last 3 hours, from the 6th to the 9th hour, from noon to 3 o'clock, where the last sacrifice is being made. It is the hottest portion of the day. Now, I've often wondered why there was darkness. Now, some say it was a lunar eclipse, that the moon got in between the sun, and that's what happened. No. So it's not that. Some say it's a solar eclipse. It's not. Now, there are people that are saying that this didn't happen. This portion of the Bible is just made up. Now, I wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case, so I went and researched to see if there were any contemporary people at that time that spoke of this, and there's a list. And one of them said it was so dark that you could see the stars. And the Greek word for this darkness that's in the text means that it was like the sun just turned itself off. It just quit. Now, why would that happen for 3 hours? It's based upon the judgment of God. God is judging sin. And there are 3 times in the Old Testament that God judged sin for the world. 3 times. The first time is with Adam and Eve, when sin came into the world. The second time was at the flood. And I know we call it Noah's flood, but it's the flood. That was the judgment of God against sin. That's the second time. And the third time was at the first Passover, where the children of Israel are trying to be freed. That's the 3 times. I know you're like, what does that have to do with Christ on the cross? Stick with me. Now, the first sin was when Adam and Eve ate of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. That was the first sin. So what God does, after he gives them their punishment, he speaks a punishment upon them. And then he turns around for Adam and Eve. He turns around and kills an animal. And he takes the skin of this animal and fashions clothes to cover their bodies. Because at this point, they had been naked and weren't ashamed. But as soon as sin came in, they realized they were naked and they felt shame. They were embarrassed. They felt fear. So God takes an animal and kills it. Because the only way you're going to get the skin of an animal is if that animal dies. So he kills an animal and covers them with skin. That was the first time God judged sin. The second time God judged sin was at the flood, where the earth is just doing whatever they want to do. They're not listening to God. They don't even care. They're just doing whatever. So God tells Noah, whose name means rest or comfort, which is going to be a teaching all by itself. And God speaks to Noah before Noah had children. And God tells Noah what he's going to do. So Noah, in this, I'm not for sure if God tells Noah to name his children this, but Noah names his 3 sons. He gives them 3 names that demonstrate what God was going to do. So in the flood of Noah, God destroys all breath of life on earth, but he saves Noah and his family. That's 8 people. That was the second time God judged sin. And the third time is during the Exodus. And I know it sounds like I'm repeating, but I'm layering this. I'm putting this as layers so you'll understand it. So the third time he judged sin was at the Exodus, where the children of Israel had been enslaved for 430 years. Whew. And God had sent Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to tell him, hey, let my people go so they can go and worship God on their own. Pharaoh wasn't having that. God sends 9 plagues. The 9th plague was a plague of darkness for 3 days. But the 10th plague was the death of the firstborn. Just stick with me with this. So you've got the death of the firstborn. So that's the 3 times. So let's go back to Genesis again. When you look at Adam and Eve's sin, God kills an animal, something that's innocent, that wasn't a party to that sin. So you have to have an innocent, something innocent to take the place, to substitute, so you don't lose your life. So God does this. He shows the first scene of substitutionary death because he kills an animal. Remember, there was no death or anything before Adam and Eve sinned. So when they sinned, they died spiritually. So then something else innocent has to die physically. So the blood there was for their sin. But the clothes of skin, the garments of skin, was to cover their shame. It represented somebody else taking the punishment that's going to shed his blood, and his body is going to be broken to cover the sins of the world. That's in Genesis. At the flood of Noah, you have Noah and his family. So, and the only ones they give the names for, which should let you know that these names are important. The only biblical names that are there are Noah and his 3 sons. Remember, I said Noah's name means rest or comfort. But Noah's first son, Shem, represents the judgment of God. If you don't have to believe me, look at pictograph form. There's a sheen mem. In pictograph form, a sheen is teeth, meaning to devour or to destroy. And mem is water or chaos. So God is telling you, this is how I'm going to judge the sin of the world this particular time. I'm going to destroy the world by water. And then Noah's second son's name is Ham, is spelled with Het Mem. A het is a wall that protects you. It keeps things back. And a mem is water. So Ham's name literally means keeping you protected from water, he's saving you. He's delivering you from the destruction of water. That's what Ham's name means. It's the picture of salvation. And then the last name, Japheth or Japheth, represents God's covenant. It's what God speaks and then what he does. His covenant was that after I bring you through this, I will never do this thing again. There will never be a worldwide flood like this ever again. This is a once and for all deal. Now, the firstborn son, Shem, that's where you get the children of Israel. They're from this line. And Shem is the firstborn son. So this is telling you that the firstborn son who's going to judge sin is going to come through the lineage of Shem. So then when you get to Ham, it's also telling you that this firstborn son is going to spiritually and physically save you from destruction, save you from calamity and chaos. That's what Ham means. That just like the ark, he's going to seal you in to where you won't be touched. You won't even smell like destruction. You won't even smell like the judgment because you're not going to go through the judgment. And then lastly, Japheth, his name represents the covenant, what God has spoken beforehand that he's going to do. And then as a sign that I'm telling you the truth, I'm going to put a rainbow up in the sky as a sign of my covenant that I won't do this again. This is a once and for all deal. That's the thing about the flood of Noah. It's a once and for all deal. This judgment is once and for all. So then thirdly, you get to the Passover. There are so many different things during the Passover that you don't see, that you might not even understand. Now, during the Passover, God tells the children of Israel, he tells through Moses, that on the 10th day of the month, you're going to bring in a lamb and you're going to make it part of your family. But on the 14th, which God's timing is different, the 14th starts at evening of that particular day. I know this is kind of weird. We start a new day at midnight. That's not the way God does his timing. God does his timing at 6 o'clock or whenever the sun goes down. That's when the day changes. So I'm taping this on Sunday. So Sunday evening to us would be Sunday evening. But to God, this would be Monday night. Our Sunday evening would be God's Monday night. That's the way. If you don't believe me, read Genesis 1. You'll see that there was evening, then there was morning the first day. So the day starts in the dark. And it starts with evening, going all the way over to the morning, and then the first day. That's how God does his time. Okay. So on the 14th, you slaughter this animal, and at twilight, you slaughter the animal, and then you start to eat. You don't break the bones, and you don't boil it in water. No, because that was the once and for all thing. No, you don't do that. You've got to cook this all the way through. There's no blood to be, you can't eat things raw. You can't have blood dripping. No. What you do with the blood of this animal, you take the blood of the animal and you do 3 swipes on the doorway. So you got the side post, this side post, and then across the lintel, the top. These are the 3 swipes. You had 3 sons from Noah. And also, to get to Noah through the lineage of Adam, you have to go through the 3rd son of Adam, which is Seth. So getting back to the Exodus, so you have to swipe the doorpost. And if you've followed any of my teachings, you will find out that these 3 swipes represent the letter Tav. That's the 22nd letter and final letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And it represents, its symbol is the cross. Honestly, it is. And it represents a covenant or a sign. And everybody that did this, all the children of Israel, if they put this on their doorpost, they're supposed to stay in the house and stay behind the blood. You're not supposed to come out. Because we call him the death angel, but it was the angel of God that was going through, and he was looking to see if he saw the blood. That was the marking that said this, not only is this house spared, but this house is protected. The word Passover is Pesach, and one of the letters in there is a thorn. And the thorn represents your protection. It just doesn't, Pesach doesn't mean that God just jumped over something. It means he's protecting you. As long as you stay behind the blood. I'm trying my best to just teach this. As long as you stay behind the blood of the Lamb, you are protected. So what do all 3 of these things have to do with Christ on the cross? I'm glad you asked. Because first of all, if you look at Adam and what he went through, it has to be a substitutionary death. Something innocent has to die for our sins. That's part of Adam. And And it has to come through the line of Seth because he was appointed. That's what Seth's name means, appointed. Secondly, that it was going to be a blood sacrifice, and the body of this sacrifice was going to be broken for us to cover us. That's true. That's the truth. Secondly, this is going to be a once and for all sacrifice. That's what the sacrifice of Christ is. It's a once and for all sacrifice, just like the flood of Noah. And because we only look at the prominent names, and because people have lied on one of Noah's sons and made him out to be a pervert when that is not true. I've done a study on Ham. Go back and read or watch that. It will open your eyes to how wonderful God is. And you would often wonder, because with these three sons, they talk about the race of these people. Not in the Bible, but everybody else makes the flood of Noah about race. And everybody says this middle son, Ham, is so dirty and he was cursed to be black. That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. God never says that. Matter of fact, if people don't watch it, you often wonder why people hate a certain group. They make up stories. Anybody could lie on them. They enslaved a group of people based upon this Genesis account, saying that this person was a mastermind and the driver of sexual sin. And he was not. He is actually the picture of the Messiah. And whether you like it or not, this is repeated through Scripture over and over and over. And then thirdly, the Passover. This was the death of the firstborn. It was the death of the firstborn. All this has to do with the judgment of sin that the Egyptians had been doing. God had told Pharaoh or the king to release my people so they can serve me. Pharaoh's like, I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know this Jehovah. Get on out of here. I'm going to make your work even harder. So God gives him 10 plagues, and the last plague was the death of the firstborn. Now, this is important because the salvation of the world was based upon the death of the firstborn. The only begotten son. Look at the scripture in Amos 8, verses 9 and 10. That talks about it's going to be dark. That is going to be super dark. And when he dies, you're going to grieve over him like he's the firstborn son. God is so smooth because we look at things as isolated incidents. And I don't know why we do that. God has judged sin from Adam to Noah to the Passover. All three of these represents the 3 hours of darkness. This darkness that Christ took on should have been ours. Honestly. We're always asking for justice. When we see a crime by certain people, we have all these slogans basically saying this person deserves what he gets because of the crime that they committed. Just think of what Christ did for you in the dark. He did some of his best work in the dark. In the dark was creation. In the dark right here, he was creating a new life for us. in the dark. The very things that we deserved, he took on. He took on darkness before. But in this, he took on the penalty for every last sin in the dark. We buy night lights for our kids because they're afraid of the dark. The way we treat people, some of us are afraid of the dark. The dark. Some of us treat other people so poorly because the darkness that's in their heart. You can't see somebody else as someone God created because the darkness that's on the inside of your heart. You haven't allowed Christ to shine the light on your darkness. And even when it's pointed out, you fight against it. You have your beliefs. Okay? But Christ did his best work in the dark. From creation and now at the cross. The fact that God did this, and he places clues all throughout history that what he's going to do on the cross, this once and for all action, is greater than anything you could ever make up. So you got 3 hours of darkness that represent the 3 times God judged sin. And then when Christ dies, God recognizes this sacrifice. And he rips apart the veil that was there between, that kept you from going into the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest could go there. It's almost like a contract being ripped up. You've seen people rip up contracts that are now null and void, where things have been paid off and they rip it. They rip things from top to bottom. Now that we're saved, we can go into the Father, into his presence, not being ashamed. Remember, that's what happened with Adam and Eve, but we can go boldly into his presence. But that's the difference. What we were back then has now been ripped up. That old contract was ripped apart. And those of us who weren't Jewish, it doesn't matter anymore. Because the perfect sacrifice takes everybody.
It was at the cross, where my salvation was paid for. At the cross, where I first saw the light, and the burdens of my heart rolled away. It was there by faith I received my sight, and now I am happy all the day.